All of Cape Verde's islands are of volcanic origin, a characteristic shared by several archipelagos in the North Atlantic. Despite their common geology and geographical proximity, the island's landscapes are quite varied. Some are almost entirely desert, while others abound with lush vegetation. Many different bird species have been recorded here. Portuguese sailors arrived on these islands in the second half of the 15th century. The island soon became a trading post highly coveted by other naval powers. The painted ceramic tiles known as azulejos depict the transatlantic trade which brought wealth to the Portuguese colony. The pro-independence leader Amilcar Cabral was assassinated in 1973, 2 years before independence. Cape Verde's inhabitants are descended from the interbreeding of Portuguese colonists and Africans from the mainland. The archipelago has 500,000 inhabitants. A large number of Cape Verdeans have emigrated, and there are in fact more of them living abroad than on the islands. Sports, and football in particular, are very popular. The population is very young. 60% of Cape Verdeans are under the age of 25. Education is a priority. 75% of children go to school. The vast majority of the population is rural and has to adapt to a difficult and demanding environment. With limited means at their disposal, their makeshift dwellings often become permanent. In the built-up areas, remnants of the colonial era are everywhere. And modern architecture is proof that this country is the least poor in West Africa. The late great singer Cesaria Evora did a great deal to promote the country overseas. Her body now rests in her homeland. Her cultural influence in Cape Verde, as in the rest of the world, cannot be underestimated. Her music's nostalgic tunes are in sharp contrast with the frantic rhythms of the carnival. Introduced by the Portuguese, Catholicism is the archipelago's principal religion. Other religions also flourish here, such as Protestantism. Cape Verde is a fervently religious country. Places of worship are well frequented. And despite the proximity of Africa, there is little sign of spiritualist cults. Steep slopes make agriculture a challenge, and half of the land is uncultivated. In the valleys enriched by alluvial deposits, certain crops can be cultivated where the land has been terraced. Over half of the population works on the land. Despite some encouraging results, a large proportion of the country's food is imported. Livestock has to make do with meager pastures. Uncultivated land, which can also provide food for livestock, is very rare. Fishing remains a small-scale industry, despite Cape Verde's waters being rich in sea life. In fact, on some of the islands, fishing is virtually the only resource. With its paucity of natural resources, Cape Verde has turned its attention towards means of renewable energy. These now account for 30% of the island's electrical power. Managing the water supply is absolutely vital to a country which has been afflicted by decades of drought. All the more so since industry is limited to the extraction of the volcanic rock, which is used in the manufacture of the local version of cement. Along with salt, which has been a major resource only since the 19th century, crafts have started to make a contribution to the country's economic diversity. Despite being produced on a small scale, crocheted cotton items have attracted people's attention. Similarly, the strong spirit known as grog is distilled from sugarcane, using tried and tested methods, and has become Cape Verde's national beverage. Commercial ports are Cape Verde's best asset in the quest for economic development, especially since the network of tarmacked roads is only now beginning to be developed. What roads there are paved with volcanic rock. Most of the islands have an airport, and 4 of these can accommodate international traffic. Electronic communications are a growing trend here, like everywhere else. And there's a mobile telephone network, which in theory covers all the islands and tries to blend into the landscape. Shipping links between the islands are vital, particularly for the nascent tourist industry. Off the beaten track, Cape Verde has plenty to offer visiting tourists, including sites of outstanding natural beauty and an almost limitless range of marine activities. Thanks to 3,000 hours of sunshine per year, tourism has become the driving force behind Cape Verde's economic growth. In 10 years, this sector has grown 6 times faster than the national economy. For the Creole Archipelago, the sky's the limit. To the south, Santiago is the largest of Cape Verde's islands. Since the mid-19th century, it has been home to Cape Verde's capital, Praia, which is also the country's most populous city. Praia has seen a remarkable population boom, and in fact is home to a quarter of the country's people. Apart from its administrative buildings, the city has kept some striking relics of its colonial architectural heritage, including churches. The Catholic Church has shown its support for Cape Verde, which was once under the yoke of Marxism. Pope John Paul II's visit in 1990 was a reminder of this support. Praia was for many years a clandestine port used by traders seeking to avoid paying customs duty. Nowadays, much of the port's activity involves the fishermen. The ocean is rich with life, and some spectacular catches can be seen along the quayside. Despite the size of some species, these fishermen cannot compete with the industrial fisheries, whose trawlers can net in one trip more than thousands of small-scale fishermen can in a year. This imbalance is a real threat to Cape Verde's fishing industry. Santiago's fruit and vegetable market is a real showcase for its variety of agricultural riches. The problem is that the island is unable to sell these throughout the archipelago. It's impossible to transport bananas, for example, without packaging them properly. A new approach to processing agricultural produce is essential. In Sucupira market, most of the goods on sale are non-perishable. Textiles are sold as finished goods, although alterations can be made on site. The market stalls are brimming with all manner of goods. It's important to remember, though, that for many years Cape Verde was one of the world's poorest countries. Monitoring children's diets is still a priority here. Carefully dredged in flour and deep fried, this fish is popular with everyone. It's a delicious local version of fast food.
Santiago Morail, the best in Cape Verde.
Many have left the other islands to settle in Praia. This rural exodus also explains the capital's rapid development. Erosion has greatly marked the face of Cape Verde. Ribeira Grande Valley is a perfect example. Humans have also left their mark here. Standing beside the ocean, the royal fort of St. Philip dates from the end of the 16th century and was designed to overlook the valley and discourage pirates from attacking. English corsair Sir Francis Drake himself left the area in ruins. The Portuguese first landed at Cidade Velha and built Africa's first cathedral. It was their first imprint on tropical soil. Great Portuguese sailors could see the dreamlike vision of the cathedral in the distance. Nothing remains of their boats but engravings in the stone. Life for the early African slaves here hung by a thread. They were herded into the town, and the punishment for any misdeed was the pillory. An absolute priority for Cape Verde is taking care of its plantations. Plant life feeds the soil with organic matter, but also stabilizes it with its roots and prevents it from being washed away down the slopes. This is the only way this land can be cultivated. When the conditions are right, Cape Verde can produce some very profitable crops, such as papayas, bananas, and most of all, sugarcane. Sugarcane prospers here in this volcanic soil, but it needs a great deal of water, and not all of the islands have it. Without enough high ground, clouds cannot form and it never rains. Some plants, however, do just fine.
We're now standing at the foot of one of Cape Verde's oldest baobab trees.
The baobab is the archetypal tree of Africa's arid tropics. Its softwood has no commercial use, but it does retain groundwater. Cape Verde does not grow enough cane to produce sugar, but the cane is used for producing grog, the local rum.
So in here we put the water and sugarcane juice. We then distill the mash by boiling it in a still. The vapor condenses in here, and we collect the liquid in this big barrel right here.
A part of Cape Verde's terroir that's not to be missed. The countryside provides little in the way of sustenance, but it is still vital. Small-scale farmers come to Assomada market to sell their produce and also to buy basic necessities. "3,000 kilometers away from Lisbon, Cape Verde's remoteness was a vital tool of the dictator Salazar's repression in Portugal. A concentration camp was built in Tarrafal to the north of Santiago. Political prisoners here were subjected to treatments directly inspired by the Gestapos. When the dictatorship fell in 1974, the camp gates closed on its nefarious past. The Atlantic Ocean's waves inspire respect.
Conditions are just right today. This here is a good spot. Good waves. We like it like this. No one knows about it, so we get left alone. There aren't too many people here. It's perfect.
Spots like this make Cape Verde a popular destination for surfers. Resistance to colonization took many forms. In Santiago's northwest, rebels known as rebelados peacefully resisted the Catholic Church's attempts to outlaw their animist practices. They consider themselves Africans, not half-breeds. Rebelados gradually opened up to the outside world they had long rejected.
In the old days, we were all Catholics, but during the 40s, the community became divided and we became rebels. What makes us different is that we only use natural means. Candles, oil lamps, no electricity. We put our faith in the light of God.
To the west of Santiago lies the almost perfectly circular island of Fogo, named after the Portuguese word for fire, also Fogo, owing to the live volcano, the Pico de Fogo, which towers 2,800 meters over the island. On the west coast of the island sits its main town, São Felipe. The architectural heritage of several eras is evident here and shows off the island's prosperity. In fact, the island of Fogo has never been short of resources. As these beautiful colonial mansions, known as sobrados, with their elegant balconies, demonstrate. The island's social structure, its inhabitants' way of life, even their way of thinking, have all been influenced by contact with the outside world. Many Cape Verdeans emigrated to America, but did not lose touch with their homeland. Some even came back here, bringing with them great purchasing power. During the 19th century, American whaling ships used to stop off here and employed local labor. Emigrants set sail for shores far from the black, sandy beaches of home. Fogo Island is lucky enough to have a mountainous landscape, meaning clouds can form and encourage plant life. In the small town of Cova Figueira, life goes by peacefully. There's nothing to disturb the calm of the oceanside township. Among the main attractions here are the flashy American sports cars belonging to people who have clearly succeeded in the US. With these and their spectacular homes, their way of life stands out in Cape Verde. The tragedy of Cape Verde's countryside is the wood the locals chop down for cooking. There is no other way, and yet it is the main cause of the island's desertification, which is exacerbated by the voracious appetite of the local goats. Ancient lava flows are clearly visible on the slope of the volcano. The speed at which the lava flows into the ocean depends on how hot it is. The higher the temperature, the more fluid the lava is and the faster it flows. Nothing can stop a lava flow, not even a slow one. The volcano provides building materials for homes. The monster seems to tolerate the presence of the humans at its feet. Lava is everywhere in the town of Mosteiro. To offset the pervading volcanic grey, the locals paint their homes in bold, bright colours. The town lies right next to the Pico do Fogo. Once broken down, lava makes for very fertile soil, enabling the growth of a great many plant species. Notably, the high-maintenance coffee tree, one of the world's most sought after. Once known as São Felipe, the island is now named after the volcano, as if the locals wanted to appease it and earn its protection. As we approach the country's highest point, the vegetation becomes noticeably sparser. Pico de Fogo has the characteristic conical shape of the stratovolcano. This means that new strata or layers of lava accumulate after each new eruption.
The lava I'm walking on dates from 1951, the year of one of Fogo's biggest eruptions. Fogo Island is still an active volcano, so it could erupt at any moment. That's why an alarm system has been installed in the crater and seismographs all around the island, so that the island's population can get plenty of warning. In theory, an eruption could be predicted 3 months before it happens.
The Pico de Fogo rises out of a vast caldera 9 kilometers in diameter. A caldera is what remains of an ancient collapsed volcanic cone. Its fertile soil is cultivated by the local populace in Chadas calderas. In this hamlet, most people even have the same surname, Montront. The name came from a 19th century French aristocrat who had many wives and an impressive number of descendants here. The volcano can be climbed, but one can also race down its slopes, running in its crumbled lava or scoria. The ferociously hot lava forms ripples as it cools and sets, providing a source of inspiration for artists. Grapevines were introduced to the caldera by the ubiquitous Montront. They produce the famous lava wine known as Manécon. On a clear day, the volcano is visible from everywhere in Cape Verde. At the eastern end of the archipelago, Boa Vista Island is closest to the African mainland, being only 500 kilometers from the coast of Senegal. The island is volcanic, yet the sand on the beaches is light in color. This is because the sand comes from coral reefs. These form an obstacle, but without preventing access to the port of Sairé on the northwest coast. Boa Vista's proximity to Africa has allowed it to develop age-old commercial ties. Constant winds made trading easier and carried the sounds of the great continent's songs across the seas. African influences on Cape Verde are plain to see. The archipelago is in fact part of Sahelian Africa. Strictly speaking, the Sahel is a geographical area which combines a dozen countries south of the Sahara Desert, all sharing ethnic and cultural similarities. This doesn't mean that games of table football are not just as hotly contested here as elsewhere. The climate here is dry, and the drinking water supply is rough and ready. Every day, water has to be collected, sometimes from very far away, and brought back on foot before night falls. The desert sand of Viana is typical of Africa's Sahel region. It gets into and over everything. In a hostile environment such as this, certain plant species cannot survive, while others have adapted by altering their roots or their leaves. Trees are planted as a kind of levee to slow the sand's inexorable progress. In fact, it's the wind that moves the sand around. To prevent this, the colonists planted acacia trees. Unfortunately, these took over the terrain and to the detriment of native species. Nature can cover up the harm done by humans, but this can take many years. For example, the Cabo Santa Maria ran aground here in 1968. The locals stripped off what they could use and left the salt from the seawater to do the rest. Toward the south of the island now. Boa Vista is Portuguese for beautiful view. João Galego is a small town inland. In Cape Verde, unemployment has fallen from 20% to 10% in 10 years. A very positive sign. Even so, the islanders are very dependent on money sent by their countrymen in the diaspora. Expatriates alone send almost half the foreign aid that comes each year into the country. Craftwork is an important element for the economy and for employment in Cape Verde. Each person can give full rein to their art and their skills. Craftwork also helps to send ecological messages.
It's important to make people aware of the disappearance of the turtles on Boa Vista. That's one of the reasons I do sculptures of them.
Sea turtles have almost disappeared from the other islands of Cape Verde. On the coast, when you get to the Morro Negro lighthouse, you've reached the closest point to Africa. It's quite a thrill.
Nature, above all. It's one of the things I like the most. And the wind.
There are no limits. The frontiers are pushed back.
In that direction, east, there's the coast of Mauritania and Senegal.
To the north of Boa Vista lies Sal, the oldest island in the archipelago. It emerged from the ocean 50 million years ago. When the Portuguese arrived in Cape Verde, they met absolutely no one. The islands were completely uninhabited. However, it is quite possible that before the Portuguese landed, Arab or African boats called in here. The depth of the water and the currents are propitious for fishing, even with limited means. Santa Maria is a bustling town in the south of the island. The island of Sal could well have remained deserted when the Portuguese colonized, and yet there is quite a lively atmosphere, and the population has not stopped increasing. The island has opened up to outside influences, while at the same time developing its own personality. At the end of the 18th century, a discovery was made that profoundly changed the island and the course of its history. In a completely featureless landscape and on the moon-like site of Pedralume, a large deposit of salt was discovered. The island of Sal, in fact, takes its name from the salt flats that made its reputation. At the beginning of the 20th century, the French carried on working the site, but this is on a much smaller scale today. Pascal Laborde knows all about the history of the salt lakes.
These are the Pedra Luma salt pans. We're right in the crater of a volcano. You can see the mark of the volcano here. This is a unique phenomenon. Our island is one of the oldest, so it is erosion that has flattened it. And we suppose that seawater got into the mouth of the volcano and over the years formed a natural salt marsh. It has been submerged by the sea several times.
Salt concentration is very high in the water lying in the middle of the lake, so you can very easily float in it.
The French bought the concession from the Portuguese in 1900, and from then on, they industrialized the site and began to extract salt in great quantities. For example, they produced about 40 tons of salt a month, which was exported pretty well everywhere. Brazil, Africa, and some ships even went to Europe. At that time, the Portuguese used donkeys to carry the salt to the little port a bit further down, while the French built a cable car. All the supports you see here and the whole structure of the cable car were made from wood brought from France, because there is no wood on this island. So all the wood you see is larch wood from Savoy.
On the west coast of the island, nothing disturbs the peace and quiet of the village of Palmeira. The people of Cape Verde learn French and English at school, but the official language is that of the former colonists, Portuguese. However, for most Cape Verdeans, the mother tongue is Creole. It's the local language, which has a number of variations from one island to another. The origins of Creole are found in the language that the masters spoke with the slaves. On the coast, you find heaps of large shellfish called lambis. These are crushed to form a chalky powder, which is then used as a complement to the volcanic soil. The volcanic rock of Buracona withstands the ferocity of the ocean. The water hollows out cavities where the light sometimes manages to enter. At a certain angle, the sun's rays light up the bottom of the blue eye. At Ponta Preta, surfers enjoy the ocean. This spot is known the world over. To be surfed, a wave can't break at the same time along its whole length. A wave that breaks progressively to the right is known as a right.
We have one of the most beautiful waves in the world here, called Ponta Preta. We're on the west coast of the island of Sal, so you have a wave, a right, which you could say is world class. There are people who come from the world over to surf that wave. Hawaiians, Australians, we've seen Brazilians and quite a few French too.
For people who are into pictures or thrills, it's a really incredible spot.
It's true that visually, for a photographer or a cameraman, or even just people watching, you're really right in front of the wave. It's like you could reach out and touch it. Here you're really facing the wave, and you can see the guy who's going to surf the whole length of it to the beach.
Kite flying among the dunes? No. Ponta Preta is also a kite surfing paradise. A board pulled by a sail. This place too has an international reputation. Mitu Monteiro is a former world champion.
There are lots of people who come here from Europe, America, and also from Africa. They come to kite surf. The conditions are great here. It's one of the best spots in the world. They all come here, even beginners and people who are already quite good at it. There are also terrific waves, so there's lots of people who come to kite surf here.
It's completely flat here, and used to be called in Portuguese lana, which means plain. And on this plain, it's quite common to see mirages. The cows are real, but further away, the heat produces surprising optical illusions. Behind the illusion, there is reality. Many poor people live in the favelas. One Cape Verdean in 5 lives on less than $1 a day. Espargos is the main town on the island of Sal. The town made its mark on history before the Second World War. The Italian dictator Mussolini was granted permission by his Portuguese counterpart to build an airport for refueling on the route to South America. That airport still exists. There's no airport anymore on the island of Santo Antao, the largest of the Windward Islands, and one of the wildest in the archipelago. So the boat is the only way to get to the island. The boats dock at Porto Novo in the southeast. The ferry is a vital link for the island and its small businesses. All domestic animals, like the horse, were introduced into Cape Verde by the Portuguese. The dry climate is not at all friendly to animals. And yet, on Santo Antao, the horse can fit perfectly well into the environment. It adapts to all terrains and has no problem with the difficult conditions. It belongs to the island's traditions. The island's volcanic origins are quite visible. However, erosion has deeply marked the landscape. It took Herculean efforts to introduce agriculture to the island. On well-exposed slopes, terraces have been cut to make it possible to grow crops. There is no drought in this part of Cape Verde. The island's peaks cause the formation of clouds which provide very welcome rain. The ancient Cova crater is a vast, cultivated field. According to legend, God created the world, and when his work was done, he threw a handful of the leftover earth into the Atlantic Ocean. And thus were born the Cape Verde Islands. The first scientific observations of the volcanic rocks of the archipelago were carried out during the first half of the 19th century by a 22-year-old Englishman. He was later to revolutionize biology. His name was Charles Darwin. With so many hills, the smallest patch of flat land has to be used. And with a bit of imagination, you can even find a big enough space for a football pitch. In the valleys of Santo Antao, it's easy to understand why the Portuguese, when they arrived, called the archipelago Cabo Verde, Green Cape. At that time, there were no banana trees, but the color was the same. The valleys are so very narrow and steep that the work of the farmers of Santo Antao is far from easy. Mechanization is out of the question, and yields are low when the sugarcane has to be harvested by hand. Machines are used finally to extract the cane juice. But energy is still provided by animals. It's the quickest way to get from cane juice to grog. Under the plumes of the flowering sugarcane, it's clear that Santo Antao's resources are mainly agricultural. The crops are very varied and provide food for the whole archipelago. But much more would have to be produced for the country to do without imports. It will be a long time before Cape Verde improves to any degree the per capita income. The younger generation are in waiting for their turn to make the country take off. There is no lack of ideas. One of them is green tourism. But as long as wood remains the only fuel, nature will be at risk and development on hold. Nature is not so generous in the center and the south of Santo Antao. The sparse vegetation has to cling to barren soil to provide the people with some means of subsistence. When there is no vegetation, the rock is left bare, scoured by erosion. The thin layer of soil has been washed away, and with a few exceptions, life seems to have deserted the landscape. But it hasn't said its last word. Near Santo Antao, the island of São Vicente is one of the smallest in the archipelago. It has nevertheless always been important thanks to the port of Mindelo, which was for a long time a very busy port of call in the Atlantic. Ships moor in a large, well-sheltered bay. Transatlantic vessels used to come here to replenish their stock of coal on an island that served as a depot. São Vicente was one of the last islands in the archipelago discovered by Portuguese sailors like Diogo Afonso. The island remained uninhabited for over 3 centuries. And then the situation changed and Mindelo acquired an architectural heritage worthy of interest. The town grew wealthy and life became very pleasant. The economic activity of the area developed. The magnificent municipal market provides a good example with its fresh produce brought from the neighboring island of Santo Antao. The population welcomed visitors calling in here from the world over. Quite naturally, all generations rubbed shoulders and formed a harmonious mixture. In a very short time, the whole of the town of Mindelo became the place where many influences and inspirations mingled. This is particularly true from the musical point of view. As far as instruments are concerned, the guitar is fundamental to Cape Verdean music. And the work of the craftsman is essential.
It's an art that has come down through my family. I'm carrying on the work that my father did. Traditional Cape Verdean types of music are the morna, the caldera, and also the mazurka.
Music impregnates the work of many artists in Mindelo. Whatever their medium and their mode of expression, creators abound in the town where Cesaria Evora was born and died. Even if they've gone on to greater things, artists are attached by an invisible thread to their island. At the beginning of February, an important event is prepared. People are fixing things, sewing, cutting and painting non-stop. They're putting the finishing touches to the preparations for the big event of the year, the carnival. On the morning of Mardi Gras, people come from miles around to the center of Mindelo. You mustn't be late, and it's now time to get warmed up and take part in the great procession which will march all around the town. Everyone keeps to his place. The beauty queens and the folk groups follow one another without a break. The streets are throbbing with the steps of the dancers in a whirlwind of rhythms and colors. In Mindelo, the carnival is the highlight of the season. Every year, the organizers know that they have to be up to the job.
It's a cultural event that has great importance, not only locally but nationally. We usually have a lot of visitors coming to Mindelo from various Cape Verde islands and also from our diaspora, not only from the USA, but also from Europe and also Africa. They come specifically for the carnival in February.
The finest feathers make the finest birds. They fly over a festival in which all the sections of the island society take part. São Vicente is not the most colorful of Cape Verde's islands. The sky, the ocean, the sand and the rock, once more volcanic, provide the only colors on an extremely arid island. The lack of fresh water explains why the island remained uninhabited for so long. When the first people arrived, they lost heart and soon turned to the sea to find some means of subsistence. Fishing is still the main resource of São Vicente. But repairing fishing nets is of little interest to small boys. They are all convinced that one day they'll become stars in their favorite sport. Another source of fun is the game of uril, better known in Africa by the name of awale. In the shadow of the volcano Colonial, they've managed to put color onto the bare earth. It's a sort of unreal oasis that pays homage to the determination and energy of farmers. On the other hand, they've abandoned the idea of trying to grow grass on the golf course. It's a cultural shock, but after all, the swing is none the worse for that.
The difference is this. It's easier to play on grass. Grass is more adapted to the tee. You need more impact on bare earth. Grass is easier than earth. Earth is difficult because there are things that complicate the game, like stones, for example.
All of Mindelo's districts are represented in the carnival procession. For peoples who have known slavery, the carnival takes on a new dimension. It's the chance to switch roles, to change the course of events, to rewrite history. The carnival is the victory of those who had no history. They get their own back on the past and found a community of thought. And when night falls on Mindelo, the party kicks off again. Cape Verde can count on the dynamism of its people. It can bank on the deep roots of its culture and its ancestors' heritage.